traveling this week, all week, with a special guest.
Say hello. Oh, don't be so aloof, buddy.
So, no building going on, no designing, but lots of time for thinking. Dangerous, I recognize. There's some squirrels. And I've been thinking about last week's video. If you haven't seen it, I fabricated a display cabinet for a few of the bits and bobs I've collected for my 30 years working in the film industry. And if you have seen it, you may have noticed that I didn't talk about really the vast majority of objects I put in it. And that's because I didn't feel like I'd provided adequate context for why I have some of the things I have, and the relative appropriateness of squirreling away mementos from film productions gets murky quickly. I didn't want to set any bad examples. So, allow me to provide some of that context, and I will then show you the entirety of my odd little movie artifact collection. Good plan, Hugo? So kids, if you work in the film industry, don't make off with proprietary stuff. I know the line can seem fuzzy on occasion, but that fuzzy line gets folks into real trouble. The majority of the things I have came to me as gifts, like... Let's get things underway with this design maquette from Steven Spielberg's AI. We sculpted a massive version of this using this sculpt as a guide. So that's not the original maquette, I think, obviously. It's a casting of the original that was given to me fairly recently by a friend because I sculpted the big one along with Mark Siegel. And the reason castings were made in the first place was to facilitate scaling up the sculpture. We took the castings and with a little bit of math, sliced the cast maquette latitudinally to create essentially a topo map, which we scaled up for the big sculpture, which we made by stacking 1 foot 4 pound urethane and used those topologies to give us a target for the initial sculpt. Make sense? Topoka City. Episode 2, I designed and built a whole series of small architectural details that went on the larger domes, if you're familiar with that set. This and the next few pieces are what I'd call master models, scratch-built from styrene and model kit parts, and they would have been provided to the mold room. They would make multiples for the shooting model, and these masters would have ended up in the dumpster, or in this case, in boxes in my various ILM offices for 20 years or so. I'm particularly fond of this one. It would be a landing platform for incoming ships. Also of note, to entertain the mold maker who made it, I put garbage inside it so it functions like a rattle. I don't know if this is the case industry-wide, but certainly in the ILM model shop, the artists who worked in the mold room were the nicest people going. Just saw Tony Preciado recently. And they would often save molds of interest on the shelf, and when they were making a run for the shop, if they had extra resin, they would use that extra resin to fill those old molds. And that's where things like this Jack Skellington head came from. I didn't work on that show, but I got this as a gift from a kind mold maker. Back to Topoka City. Here's a final cast and painted piece. Why I have this, I don't know. Maybe it was rejected from the model. Even more Topoka City. I kept these largely because they're really good examples of scratch, styrene, and model kit model making. Backing up one movie to Star Wars Episode 1, the invitation to the premiere. Not the premiere. Here's the invitation to the screening, which took place at the Coronet Theater, which was great, because that's where Episode 4 first screened. Wow. Episode 1 was my first big project at ILM, and man was I excited to be working on it. Did this movie also teach me not to become overly emotionally tied to the quality of the end result, but remain focused on developing my craft and working with and supporting the artists I worked with? Yes, it did. We were given these groovy patches at the end of that project. This might be the greatest thing you see today. Episode 1 in the pod race. Focus. Episode 1 in the pod race sequence, there's huge crowds in a huge stadium which we built, and Michael Lynch devised the strategy of filling the crowds with thousands and thousands and thousands of colored swabs, which were blown from the back by little fans so that they moved a little bit. A fair number of things we built for episode 1 were pyro models. They might have been digital in the feature film, but they needed to blow up, so we made practical versions. Here's a handful of debris that probably came from the stage when we were cleaning up from, what were they called? Naboo Fighter? A half-melted piece of battle droid. I can't remember what model this came from, but it also would have been a pyro model. And it has a beautiful paint job. I'm gonna guess painted by Steve Walton or Brian Gurnand. They were the pearlescent metallic experts at the time. Episode 1, a C-3PO eyeball. There's a bit in The Phantom Menace that has Anakin installing one of C-3PO's eyes. That C-3PO puppet was built in the ILM model shop by a huge crew. Grant Imahara did the electronics, and I helped him assemble the eyes for that gag. I think this one may have been a prototype or one that didn't work for one reason or another. I had the absolute privilege at the time of modeling Anakin's pod racer engines. Lauren Peterson made the cockpit section. Melanie Wallace painted the model, and this was on the finished model, and then the design changed, and I had to tear this off and replace it with something. I kept the torn off piece. Traveling back in time, I made an independent stop-motion short, and it was what partly got me my gig at ILM. It's up on the YouTube channel if you want to check it out. A sculpture and gift from a remarkable sculptor, Mike Murnane, Flesh Kitty of the Yellow. My first significant gig in the industry, 1995, 94, for Nickelodeon Action League Now, directed by Howie Hoffman, run out of Reggie Groff's studio. This is a character of the Flesh, a burned version of the model, and I found Meltman's head. Sometimes productions just wrap up so quickly that people don't ask for things back. Action League Now was made with this teeny tiny crew, and one of my many jobs was caring for the cast, which in this case was a set of puppets. And by the end of production, they were in really rough shape. And I ended up with what may be the only complete set of Action League Now characters in existence. Not really film industry related, but from the same time period. My iPhone 1. Speaking of Tony Preciado, he at the time was co-host of a magnificent superhero party. A temporary tattoo from Starship Troopers. I love this for some reason. It's my model shop forklift certification card. This is my mildly insane keyboard that I used throughout my years as a digital artist. Fawn Davis's BattleBot. A martini glass crew gift from AI. ILM always issued an annual pin. This is my first one from '97. The big Star Destroyer model from Focus. The big Star Destroyer from Empire was out on a museum tour and was heavily damaged in shipping. It came back to us. Pretty sure it was John Goodson who headed up a restoration effort. This is one of many shattered pieces from the original. In the digital model shop, quite often when we needed to recreate things from live action would send us samples to match. This is from Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull. Another example of that, also from Indiana Jones, some dog tags. Something I saved undoubtedly because the object itself is beautiful. This is a plaster mold for an architectural detail from Peter Pan. Oh, what am I sitting on? I had the honor of working with Nilo Rodis Jamero for a while, making design maquettes for him. This is a taxi cab. For the Matrix sequels, I oversaw what had to have been the biggest, craziest miniature I was ever involved with. It was the crane in the dock sequence. This was a small prop in a much more complicated set. This was a railway bumper of some kind. A considerable percentage of projects that came through the model shop were things that were built to be destroyed. And a fair number of things going into this case are bits and pieces that were swept up off the stage floor after a good explosion or two. A few things from Galaxy Quest. I modeled the engines for one of the ships. I think this was the engine cover. Also from Galaxy Quest, the detail from the Ceres ship that I would have sent off to the mold room. These things from Galaxy Quest, it wasn't that long ago that I found them in some boxes. And I have to say that I'm not a big collector of movie memorabilia. The reason these things are important to me are primarily because they are tangible reminders to me of a craft that I really spent a long time developing. And a little piece I did for episode 2, the clone facility. Am I right about that? From Mars Attacks, which was done the year before I came to the model shop. This is an example of one of those little things the mold shop would produce for giggles. By the way, I am sure that all the stories I'm telling you are about 30% factually incorrect. I beg forgiveness from everyone who knows better. Pacific Rim, I was on location and they were demolishing a set. You'd be amazed at the sets that are just torn down and thrown into dumpsters because economically it makes more sense to trash something and start building again than try to store them. As they tore the set down, these cast bolts kept shooting off the set and rolling across the floor. I think my first real assignment as a real model maker was on Deep Impact. All I have to show for it is this marketing button. A sentimental moment. Visual. Ay, ay, ay. It's all right, we can piece this back together. For the last 3 years of my 21 or 22 at Industrial Light and Magic, I was given the amazing opportunity to work as an associate visual effects supervisor, and I loved that work, and it was hard for me to leave it. And these are a few things that represent that time for me. I was given my own bell, which you ring to final a shot, and recently in a jacket, I found a laser pointer from ILM Dailies. Let's add a little Richard Miller section. He was a sculptor in the model shop, wonderful man. He hired me, and these are a few Richard Miller sculpts. When working on a miniature, it's handy to have scale people around to remind you the scale of what you're building. 18th scale, 10th scale, really small scale. I just found this in a box and it's lovely. It's from Transformers 2 and it's a thank you card from my crew. A Terminator movie, I think the third one. I supervised the construction of a gas station for Pyro, and I added this, which is a scale model of the security card readers at the ILM campus in San Rafael. During my time as a supervisor of digital asset production, I always tracked the work on Post-it notes. And this represents all of the digital assets created for Pacific Rim. Every time I think we're done, I keep finding things in corners, but home stretch. This is a model detail from Anakin's pod racer. I think this is from Peter Pan, but it's an architectural detail that I'm not even sure how I did that. I know this is from Peter Pan, a tiny little door knocker. And this one is kind of peculiar. On the Matrix, again, I oversaw the fabrication of this huge miniature. I worked on it for 9 months with an amazing crew. It all culminated in a single day when the special effects department knocked it over and essentially destroyed it. I didn't have much to contribute on that day, so I largely sat and watched, and I was so worried about it all working out that I fidgeted with a piece of clay, and by the end of the day, I had created that. A physical manifestation of anxiety.
Hold on, not done.
I'm about to tell you about 2 little model control stick bits, and I claim that they're from a certain ship. Truth be told, now that I think of it, I have no idea what they're from.
These are control sticks from Yoda's command ship in episode 3? Episode 2. I don't know.